You may not realize this, but many iconic TV characters who we could not imagine any other actor playing were almost played by someone else. And the stories of how the actor swaps happened are equal parts interesting and, heartbreaking. Because the actors who eventually landed the role went on to fame and fortune, while many of the actors who were originally cast just kinda disappeared after being this close to stardom. Today, we're exploring iconic TV characters who were almost played by other actors, and they get more mind-blowing as we go. Let's start with 30 Rock. So 30 Rock was Tina Fey's love letter to her years at Saturday Night Live. And when she created the show in 2006, she wrote the role of Jenna Maroney specifically for her best friend and SNL co-star Rachel Dratch. Fey envisioned the show as a vehicle for both of them, two women navigating the chaos of producing a sketch comedy show. Dratch shot the entire pilot as Jenna, but after NBC executives saw the pilot, they made a decision that would change everything. They felt Dratch was too much of a character actress and didn't have traditional leading lady appeal. They wanted someone more glamorous, more conventionally attractive, someone who looked like a diva, not just acted like one. And the next move by NBC was a real Debbie Downer for Rachel. They brought in Jane Krakowski, who had just come off Ally McBeal and had legitimate Broadway credentials. She was polished, theatrical, and could play narcissistic with a wink. The network loved her, and Fey was, overruled. 30 Rock ran for 7 seasons and 138 episodes from 2006 to 2013. It won 16 Primetime Emmy Awards, including Outstanding Comedy Series 3 years in a row. Jane Krakowski earned 4 Emmy nominations for playing Jenna and became synonymous with the character's hilarious delusions of grandeur. Rachel Dratch played dozens of oddball characters across the series, and after 30 Rock, she continued doing character work in films and TV, but Jenna Maroney was the role that got away. Next up, 21 Jump Street. 21 Jump Street was Fox's attempt to create a cool, edgy cop show for teenagers. The premise: young-looking cops go undercover in high schools to bust drug dealers and solve crimes. When they filmed the pilot in 1987, the lead role of Officer Tom Hansen was played by Jeff Yeager. He shot the entire pilot, and Fox initially seemed happy with him. But then the network had second thoughts. Executives felt Yeager didn't have the teen idol appeal they needed. They wanted someone who could carry a show on charisma alone, someone who could make teenage girls tune in every week. Enter Johnny Depp. He didn't even want the role, but Fox kept pushing, and Depp's agent convinced him it would be good exposure. Plus, Depp was broke, so he finally said yes. 21 Jump Street became a phenomenon. It ran for 5 seasons and 103 episodes from 1987 to 1991, becoming one of Fox's earliest hits and helping establish the network as a legitimate player. And Johnny Depp in the process became one of the biggest teen idols of the late 80s. His face was on millions of bedroom walls, lunchboxes, and magazine covers. And even though he hated the show and what it became, it launched his career into the stratosphere. After 21 Jump Street, he went on to become one of the most successful and versatile actors in Hollywood: Edward Scissorhands, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, Pirates of the Caribbean, and dozens of other iconic roles. Jeff Yeager continued working steadily in television for decades. He had spots on everything from Star Trek DS9 to Mad Men. He's a solid working actor, but he never came close to the level of fame that Johnny Depp achieved. Not many do. Now, let's talk about Home Improvement, which had not one, but 2 major recasts. When Disney was developing Home Improvement in 1991 as a vehicle for stand-up comedian Tim Allen, they cast Frances Fisher as Jill Taylor, Tim's long-suffering wife. Fisher was, and is, a fantastic dramatic actress. She shot the entire pilot, and on paper, everything looked good. But ABC executives had concerns. They felt Fisher played Jill too seriously, with too much edge. She came across as genuinely frustrated with Tim rather than affectionately exasperated. ABC decided to reshoot with Patricia Richardson, who brought something Fisher didn't: warmth that balanced with the frustration. Richardson could roll her eyes at Tim's stupidity while still making you believe she actually loved this idiot and his grunts. But that wasn't the only recast. Al Borland, Tim's co-host on Tool Time, was originally played by Stephen Tobolowsky. If you don't know Tobolowsky by name, you definitely know his face. He's been in Groundhog Day, Memento, Deadwood, and countless other productions. He's one of the more prolific character actors in Hollywood. So the problem was, he had a scheduling conflict. ABC brought in Richard Karn as a guest replacement, and he impressed the network so much with his soft-spoken, sensitive, almost wounded quality that he brought, that they kept him. Home Improvement became one of the biggest sitcoms of the 90s. It spent multiple seasons in the top 5 of the Nielsen ratings, often competing directly with Seinfeld for the #1 spot. It ran for 8 seasons, 204 episodes from 1991 to 99. This may be one of the least heartbreaking examples on the list because both Frances Fisher and Stephen Tobolowsky continued working steadily after leaving Home Improvement. But the next ones on this list definitely stung. Let's move on to Three's Company. Three's Company was based on a British sitcom called Man About the House, and when ABC developed the American version in 1976, they needed to find their version of the ditzy blonde roommate. Their first pilot bombed with Suzanne Zenor playing Samantha, who was an early version of Chrissy. For the second pilot, they cast Susan Lanier as Chrissy Snow, but ABC still wasn't satisfied with the show. But instead of packing it in, calling it a day, they recast Chrissy again. They brought in Suzanne Summers, who was sexy but approachable, ditzy but endearing. Here's the crazy part. She almost torpedoed her own audition. She was so nervous that she forgot her lines and started improvising. Instead of being annoyed, though, the producers thought her flustered, scattered energy was actually perfect for Chrissy's personality. Three's Company, the show that needed 3 pilots, became a massive hit. Ran for 8 seasons, 172 episodes from 77 to 84, spending multiple years in the top 10 of the Nielsen ratings. At its peak, the show was pulling in over 20 million viewers per episode. Suzanne Summers, of course, became a household name and a pop culture icon and sold a ton of Thigh Masters, while Susan Lanier continued acting in small roles throughout the 80s and 90s, but never got another shot at sitcom stardom. Now let's do another double recast, this time with Married with Children. When Fox was developing the show in 1987 as part of their effort to establish themselves as a legitimate network, they filmed a pilot with Hunter Carson as Bud Bundy and Tina Caspary as Kelly Bundy. The show tested poorly. Fox executives felt the kids were too attractive and too nice. The whole point of Married with Children was to be the anti-family sitcom, meaning cynical and brutally honest about the failures of the American dream. The original kids didn't fit that tone, so Fox made the call to replace both of them. David Faustino took over as Bud and Christina Applegate became Kelly. The chemistry between the reconfigured Bundy family just clicked. The kids completed the dysfunctional family dynamic that made the show revolutionary. Married with Children became one of Fox's earliest and most important hits. It helped establish them as a network willing to take risks and push boundaries. Hunter Carson and Tina Caspary both continued working in Hollywood, but of course neither of them ever landed another high-profile role. Now this next one is heartbreaking. When ABC was developing Full House in 1987, they needed a wholesome, relatable dad to anchor the show. They cast John Posey as Danny Tanner. He filmed the entire pilot as Danny, the widowed father raising 3 daughters with help from his brother-in-law and best friend. Then, ABC decided they wanted someone else. Bob Saget had originally been unavailable due to scheduling conflicts with another project, but when that fell through, ABC pounced. They decided to reshoot the pilot with Saget. Posey moved his family from New York to LA specifically for this role, but ABC did not have mercy. He was done. But Saget brought something Posey didn't. He could play the straight man while still being genuinely funny. His delivery had this specific deadpan, self-aware quality that made him the perfect anchor for a show that had a lot going on. Full House became a phenomenon. It ran for 8 seasons, 192 episodes, becoming one of the defining family sitcoms of the late 80s and early 90s. It launched the Olsen twins into superstardom and made Bob Saget synonymous with wholesome TV dad energy, which is wild considering his comedy act is the polar opposite. As for John Posey, he continued working steadily in television, appearing in guest spots on everything from How I Met Your Mother to Teen Wolf. He had a long, respectable career, but obviously never landed another role that approached the level of success Full House achieved. Now this next one has an interesting butterfly effect that anyone, especially those in their 40s, will appreciate. When Joss Whedon was developing Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the WB in 1996, he cast Riff Regan as Willow Rosenberg, Buffy's shy, nerdy best friend. Regan shot the entire unaired presentation pilot with Sarah Michelle Gellar and the rest of the cast. When the WB picked up the series and ordered a full season, they decided to make changes. One of those changes was recasting Willow with Allison Hannigan. Over 7 seasons, she evolved into one of the most powerful characters in the entire Buffyverse, a witch capable of destroying the world. Buffy the Vampire Slayer became a cultural phenomenon. It ran for 7 seasons, 144 episodes, earning critical acclaim and redefining what genre television could be. For Allison Hannigan, the role made her a fan favorite, which led directly to her being cast in American Pie in 1999. Her iconic "this one time at band camp" line became one of the most quoted movie lines of the early 2000s, and that success led to How I Met Your Mother, where Hannigan played Lily Aldrin for 9 seasons. Riff Regan, on the other hand, left acting shortly after losing the role of Willow. She had a few small credits after Buffy, but she essentially disappeared from Hollywood. Her version of Willow never made it past the pilot, and she never got another major opportunity. Next up, The Big Bang Theory. When Chuck Lorre and Bill Prady created The Big Bang Theory in 2006, they filmed an original pilot that CBS immediately rejected. The problem wasn't the guys. Jim Parsons was brilliant as Sheldon and Johnny Galecki was solid as Leonard. The problem was the female lead. In that original pilot, the character wasn't named Penny. She was called Katie, and she was played by Amanda Walsh, who I, as a Canadian, remember as a VJ on Much Music. Anyway, Katie was tougher, meaner, and more overtly sexual than the character we eventually got. She was a street-smart girl who immediately saw Leonard and Sheldon as marks she could manipulate for free meals and a place to crash, and CBS hated it. Test audiences found Katie off-putting and mean-spirited. The show felt cruel rather than charming. Lorre and Prady went back to the drawing board. They softened the female lead, renamed her Penny, and recast the role of Kaylee Cuoco, who had just finished 8 seasons on 8 Simple Rules. The new Penny was warmer, more approachable, and crucially, she actually liked Leonard and Sheldon as people, even if she found them weird and socially awkward. That change made the entire show work. The Big Bang Theory became one of the biggest sitcoms of the 21st century. At its peak, the main cast was earning $1 million per episode each. Amanda Walsh continued working in television after losing the role, but she never landed another lead in a major series. And now we're getting into the crazy alternate reality zone. Let's start with Game of Thrones and Daenerys Targaryen. Emilia Clarke is Khaleesi. She's iconic in the role, and it's nearly impossible to imagine anyone else as the mother of dragons, but she wasn't HBO's first choice. When HBO was developing Game of Thrones in 2009, they cast Tamsin Merchant as Daenerys. Merchant had previously appeared in The Tudors and seemed like a strong choice for the role. She shot the entire $10 million original pilot, one of the most expensive pilots ever made. She filmed all of the early scenes, like the wedding to Khal Drogo. Then HBO screened the pilot internally and decided it didn't work. The decision was made to reshoot massive portions of the pilot, including replacing several actors. And one of those actors was Merchant. She later noted that she didn't feel the story was compelling to her at the time and lacked the experience for the role. HBO cast Emilia Clarke, a virtually unknown actress who had done some small TV roles but nothing high profile. She stepped in and completely redefined the character. Game of Thrones, of course, became the biggest television phenomenon of the 2010s. It ran for 8 seasons, 73 episodes, becoming the most watched and most discussed show on television. The show won 59 Emmys, more than any other drama series in history. The next show on this list actually was the former record holder, and Emilia Clarke became a global superstar. Tamsin Merchant continued working in television and film, but man, that's a tough role to lose. Next up, Frasier and the firing that changed TV history and is easily the least heartbreaking story in this video. You'll see why. When NBC was developing Frasier as a spin-off of Cheers in 1993, they needed to cast Roz Doyle, the radio producer who would be Frasier Crane's foil and confidant at the fictional KACL radio station. Their first choice was Lisa Kudrow. Kudrow had done guest spots on shows like Cheers and Bob, and she had the right energy, sharp, quick-witted, the perfect comedic timing. She was cast as Roz and started filming the pilot. She shot for 2 days, then the producers made a brutal call. They fired her. The official reason? They felt Kudrow was too airy and not forceful enough for the role. Roz needed to be grounded, cynical, and sexually confident, a sharp contrast to Frasier's neurotic pomposity. They brought in Peri Gilpin, who played a confident, sexually liberated Roz who was unimpressed by Frasier's pretensions. She gave as good as she got, and that dynamic made the show work. Frasier became one of the most successful sitcoms in television history. running for 11 seasons and 264 episodes, winning 37 primetime Emmys, including 5 consecutive wins for Outstanding Comedy Series, a record that still stands. But here's the massive butterfly effect that nobody talks about. Because Lisa Kudrow was fired from Frasier in 1993, she was available when Friends started casting in 1994. Kudrow auditioned for the role of Phoebe Buffay and landed it. That role turned her into a global superstar. Friends became one of the biggest shows in television history. So if Lisa Kudrow is Roz Doyle on Frasier, she's locked into that show for 11 years, she never auditions for Friends, and there's no smelly cat. There you go. And now, the most shocking almost on this list, Cheers and Sam Malone. When NBC was developing Cheers in 1982, they needed to cast a leading man bartender, and it was this close to not being Ted Danson. The role almost went to Fred Dryer, the former NFL defensive end who had played 13 seasons for the New York Giants and the LA Rams. He was 6'6", built like a linebacker, and had that classic athlete charisma. The producers loved the idea of casting a real athlete to play a former athlete. In the original conception, Sam Malone wasn't even a baseball player, he was a retired football player. The entire character was built around Fred Dryer's persona. Dryer was interested. He met with the producers, read for the part, and seemed like a lock for the role. But then, something shifted. Reports vary on exactly what happened. Some say Dryer's schedule didn't work out. Others suggest the chemistry wasn't right during screen tests. Either way, NBC decided to go in a different direction. They recast with Ted Danson, who had a completely different energy. He wasn't an intimidating former linebacker, he was a smooth-talking ladies' man with a disarming smile. They changed Sam's backstory from football to baseball. Sam became a former Red Sox relief pitcher, which gave him a very different cultural identity, about as Boston as you can get, which was perfect for the show. Cheers, of course, became one of the greatest sitcoms in television history. And we all know Ted Danson went on to become a star, and I want to leave this on a positive note. This is actually a good story. Fred Dryer, for his part, eventually got his own show, Hunter, a police drama that ran for 7 seasons from 84 to 91. He did well for himself. Hunter was a solid hit, and Dryer became known for playing tough guy cops. And the producers of Cheers liked Dryer so much that they brought him back to Cheers years later. He appeared in a recurring role as Dave Richards, one of Sam's rival bar owners. So Dryer got to be a part of the Cheers universe, just not as the lead. And perhaps that's something to remember with all of these stories. Casting is about chemistry, about tone, about finding the exact right person for the exact right moment. The shows in this video wouldn't have been the same with different actors. They might not have been as successful. They might have failed entirely. Change one thing and you change everything. And I think for all of these, we're glad things happened the way they did.